Okay. All right. For people who are joining this live stream, we are talking about our Paclet system and making it more user accessible. So, document the Paclet system for end users. Yes. Build a Paclet system repository website. Okay. And I mean, isn't there a lot of stuff to do? How do you push a Paclet onto the Paclet servers right now?
That's an internal process at the moment.
Yeah,
it's an internal script.
Okay, and in terms of revisions and so on, is there revision control there, or is it just pushing a new revision?
It's built by release engineering, and then it's tested by QA, and if it's approved, they invoke the scripts to push that live.
If a Paclet is a replacement, if a Paclet is a replacement for an existing Paclet, that is, it has all of the same, version number and Wolfram Language version restrictions and things, then the old Paclet gets replaced by the new one. Old Paclets remain if they don't, if I come up with a new Paclet that has the same name as an old one but has a different Wolfram version field, then the old Paclet sticks around.
What about new version numbering of the Paclet itself?
Version numbering of Paclets is handled by RE when they're built, or by authors who build their own. I mean, that's just
the ones that go
in general. There's only the
are...
most recent Paclet for a given Wolfram Language version. It's the only one.
No, that's not true. The Paclet server serves people going back to older versions of Mathematica. So we have Paclets that are only compatible with.
No, I understand that. For a given version, there's only one version of the Paclet that is being served. Is that correct?
That's almost always the case. For a given version, yes. Although it's possible to have a version that comes in two variants. But yes, I'll say yes to that question.
All right. So Paclets can deliver lots of different functionality. Like they can install, so we've had this rather weird install menu item here. Is it the case that Paclets install any of these things?
Yes. Paclets provide essentially all of those.
And more, or what?
And more.
Yeah, documentation, for example.
Okay. And what a Paclet fundamentally does is to install stuff into an end user's layout. Is that correct?
Yes. Into not the mathematical layout, but a place in the a user accessible part of the system.
It's called the $user base Paclets directory. It's the bottom right one in that big table.
It's under $user base directory.
Okay.
So
when you search for documentation, it's going there first, or what?
When you search for documentation, the Paclet manager is asked to find documentation, and it goes through various logic stuff. But whichever it finds, it's all done based on version numbers and things like that. So if I have a Paclet that overrides some system documentation with some newer version, then that gets found first. It's not a search order in the sense that everything is all looked at the same time, and the things that are most appropriate are then returned.
So for a given body of functionality, there has to be a way, if you want to support it, support upgrading it in a Paclet, there has to be a way of retargeting some path option that will pick it up. And typically when you look at things that are Paclet upgradable versus things that are not, that's one big factor is, whether or not, the pathing to locate that functionality is first there at all, and second, is it settable at startup time?
So wait a minute. So the typical thing then is that the main layout is changed.
No,
No, the main layout is not changed.
no. In fact, the in modern operating systems, you must assume that you can't touch the main layout.
Okay. So okay, all right. By the way, a question on our live stream is question of how this will work with GitHub. Could a Paclet be stored in GitHub and pulled in through the system?
Well, oftentimes a Paclet goes through a build process, but yes, in principle, it is possible to, to create something where we could, maybe automate, pull from GitHub and install as Paclet if we have a standardized build process.
But what will be the assets on GitHub?
Can I put something on the chat?
Yeah.
In your Zoom chat in this case.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can install Packlets from a URL. I think that's the most important thing to state here, in the sense that if you have a .paclet file that you built with Packlets, then you can just drop that right into GitHub or any place, Wolfram Cloud or whatever. It doesn't really matter as long as it's a URL. And then you can right-click on that .paclet thing, copy the hyperlink and use that as your URL to use Paclet install on.
So wait a minute. What you're saying is somebody could put in GitHub a .paclet file.
Yeah. So like right-click on that .paclet thing, and then do copy link address. And now in a new notebook, just type Paclet install, open bracket, double quotes, and then paste, and then close everything up. So you don't maybe not want to do that because it's an experimental Paclet. So maybe
but you got to uninstall it if you want.
Yeah.
So
when did you go ahead and try it? Just try it, and then we'll uninstall it.
So GitHub, what you're looking at is that GitHub has this release process whereby the the owners or maintainers of a repository can build and push releases. And so,
by the way, John,
yeah,
this is spinning. It's beach ball. This is a problem that I've been seeing for a few weeks with version 12. It's just spinning here. Look at this. What the heck's going on there?
I don't know.
Okay, so this has been happening to me for about 3 or 4 weeks. Can I do anything here to help you debug this?
I took a screenshot.
No, I understand that, but is there anything I can look at here to help debug this?
Yeah, nothing is immediately coming to mind.
Should I hit abort?
Yeah, that will end up killing the kernel likely.
The thing is that
aborted antonyms? The hell is that?
That's because we added antonyms in version 12, and I need to remove it from my Paclet because that's where it came from, or at least the idea came from there.
Oh, so that was probably... That's not going to work, Stephen. That's not going to work, Stephen.
You just need to do prototypes as a string there.
Yeah, just say prototypes. It's the name of the Paclet.
The first argument of output, capital P prototypes.
Just one word, prototypes. That's the name of the Paclet.
This is it?
With a capital
P.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the .paclet file name without the .paclet and without the version, basically.
Okay.
If the install had worked, it would have given you a nice Paclet object. Oh wait, it did. Yeah, you can use the Paclet object.
It did work.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, you could use the Paclet object as well.
So
but he had to quit the kernel. He quit the kernel. So
yeah. Incidentally, what we were seeing in this particular case, it looks like the hang that you were seeing was in trying to generate the call stack for the message.
Interesting.
The $aborted thing, you mean?
Yeah.
There's some dynamic in there.
That's what I'm saying. It's the call stack for the message.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. So wait a minute. If I want to find out what Packlets I have, what would I do here?
Type Paclet find.
Paclet find.
Sorry.
Open
Name.
close.
Oh, right. And as a string, just use a star. It's a wild card for. I mean, this is going to be a lot of Packlets.
Okay. So I mean, all kinds of junk. So what are these things? So if I wanted to okay, fine. I have no idea what this is. Is that cached data of some kind?
Well, that's old style data Packlet there.
I see.
You
So
know,
this is
astronomical data.
random stuff I've had lying around forever.
Yeah, all those ones are chemical data, astronomical data. You got a bunch of newer stuff in here.
Okay. All right. Okay. 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 Brian on our live stream comments that applications that rely on the behavior of a particular version of Packlet may fail if Packlet is replaced rather than coexisting. Microsoft had a similar problem that was called DLL hell.
It's it's possible. It's possible for this problem to rear its head if you run multiple versions of Mathematica on the same machine.
No, but the point being made is if you have a dependency on a particular version of a Packlet. So look, probably what should be the case is that you should be either able to say, I want the latest version of this Packlet, whatever that is, or I want to burn in this particular version.
Well, what we haven't
do that.
What we haven't really done up to this point, and this is the central issue of DLL, but it hasn't hit us yet because we haven't really tried to do this, is to express dependencies between Packlets. So, you know, you have Packlets A and B, both of which depend on Packlet C, but Packlet A says it wants version 1.6 of Packlet C, and Packlet B says it wants version 1.7.
Yes.
The Packard Manager does support side-by-side installation of Packlets. It does support side-by-side installation of Packlets.
But which is getting run? I mean, if the function F...
the most recent version number that matches the requirements, you know, that has requirements that match your current version of Mathematica.
Let's pull back another issue here. So right now, our Packlet system is completely open. There's no authentication. There's nothing. Now, you know, I have to say that the success of things like GitHub suggests that there's a lot of mileage from things that are completely open. It will be much more difficult. I mean, it's a whole different thing to build something, and that's where the marketplace stuff comes in and so on, to build something where we can have private Packlets. Is that a fair statement?
Well, so, I mean, I think the model to look at is NPM. So NPM is the repository for JavaScript Packlets, and for, you know, I mean, not Packlets, but, you know, yes. And they have this free public thing which people use. It's incredibly popular, and, you know, most JavaScript programmers or Node.js programmers use it, but then they also have they sell private NPM servers, so that if you're doing development inside of a company, you don't want that JavaScript to be exposed elsewhere. You know, it's your own.
Yeah, I understand completely. Okay, but so what is our idea here? Would this be another, I mean, in addition to private clouds, this is another thing people could get as a private thing?
I think the NPM model is a reasonable model.
Right, but that model doesn't allow for a yet different thing, which is, you know, right now in our cloud, we have elaborate access control where you can have an API which certain people can be, you know, permissioned to get and other people cannot be. That's different in this case. So this is one of these things where either you have access or you don't have access.
Well, and so that's kind of the it's sort of the third kind of serving. It's all public and running on our servers. It's all private and running on your servers. It's private, but it's running on our servers.
Yeah, well, so maybe that case we don't have to worry about right now, because that case is going to we could do this by having Packlets be cloud objects, for example. Right?
Yes.
So I don't know. What's that?
Yes. We could do that.
Just like, you have this on GitHub where you're just copying the Packlet, that could be a cloud object, and you could authenticate to get access to the cloud object. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Is there a problem with that? What is the Packlet server? I mean, it's just a web server that just exposes certain assets, or what?
Pretty much. It's a very simple thing. It has a little bit of logic for, you request a Packlet, and it's possible that the Packlet you get is different. If it's a newer version than the one you requested, it will give you the newer version. But it does things like logging, and there's a little bit of logic and extra stuff that is useful, like logging.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
And we do keep track of Packlet downloads, so we can use them for analytics.
And indexing too. I mean, indexing is a major part of this. The Packlet server has to be able to say what's available and what the latest version of any given thing is.
Yes, there's an index that there's, but it's a very small amount of code.
Okay, so in principle, the Packlet server, I mean, I don't know whether there's an efficiency issue or anything else, but the Packlet server could be the cloud. Is that true? With an API, with just a pure, the Packlet API in the cloud.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see any reason it couldn't be.
I think practically there would be a migration effort that would be monumental, but.
Yes.
But
what do you mean by monumental? That doesn't.
Because we have a decade plus of Packlets.
No, but if they're just files, you just move the files to another place. So is there?
I mean, if you look at them individually, yes, that's true. But there's the there's a server technology on top of it, which is not dramatic, but it needs to be efficient.
Okay, so wait a minute. So what are you guys telling me? So are you telling me? Let's look at the branches here. Okay, so one branch is we're not going to do anything with authentication with these things. You either, but nevertheless, you're proposing that we take this Packlet server and we package it so that that's something we can sell to users.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much money there is to be made off such a thing, but I think if we build it right, creating that product will be low effort.
Okay, so along with Wolfram application,
I should say if we build the public thing right, then creating the private product will be low effort. Is what I mean by that.
The public thing is not low effort, but right. Once we have that,
what do you mean? Why isn't it low effort? I mean, don't you already have that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like building the function repository, Stephen. There's a lot of code. There's a whole front interface to it, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this kind of site. We're not talking about just the current Packard servers, which are quiet little things that just serve files. We're talking about a site that people could navigate to in a browser and look at what was there, click this.
Okay, that's a different thing. So that's the repository. Okay, so wait a minute. That's the user-facing. So why is it that, I mean, I just think it's crazy to not use the repository framework for that.
Well, fine. And if our repository framework will work for that, then great. We're just saying that it's not,
I think that's what we should do. I think that's what we should plan on. Because I think otherwise, that way, then we're using the cloud. The repository framework is all backed by the cloud. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the right thing. If you say that we want exposure like shingles and things, we need the repository framework.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need shingles.
Well, and we have been talking about that. So,
okay, fine.
I mean,
all right, so
not extensively yet, but we have been talking about that.
Okay, fine. So, so now let's talk about how somebody builds. Let's just understand the flow here. So, just like somebody builds a resource object, and most of the building of resource objects is done through things like build a function repository item by, why was that so slow? With this, for example, right? Am I making sense?
Yeah.
And by the way, that font is wrong still. And that size is wrong still. It would be really good to get that fixed.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's sort of a notebook GUI for defining Packlets makes sense. Yeah, I think we'll. There's a lot of.
I think it's going to be different though, because what's a fundamental difference between Packlets and most of these other things is most of these other things, you're pulling up this form for the purpose of submitting them, and that's basically it. Whereas a Packlet is something that you develop and use on an ongoing basis on your own system. You don't need to deploy a Packlet to use it.
No, all of these other resources have that same workflow.
To publish it.
It's not only for submitting for publication, also for personal use.
Say deploy locally on this computer for my cloud account publicly in the cloud in this session only.
And, but there should still be a difference between a Packlet that someone can build and use on their own and email to their friends and a resource object that's been packaged up with more metadata for distribution.
And every time we make one of these, it's a new UX and new design. So we'll think about the common workflows and design.
Okay, so wait. But Brad said a different thing there. He said, okay, so in this case, we are not supporting the following functionality. For the function repository, the idea of here's a function, it's been packaged up, I'm going to send it by email to my friend. We're not supporting that. What we're supporting is you push it, for example, to the cloud, and then you send your friend a link to that cloud, URL, and then they can pull it down on their system.
The equivalent analogy, I think, is for the function repository, I can type out a function into an email and send it to someone.
Yeah, but it doesn't give you
that's something that exists. It's not great.
No, it doesn't give you everything. It doesn't give you the documentation. It doesn't give you a whole bunch of stuff.
Right, but functions exist outside of the repository. And I similarly think that Packlets should exist as first-class objects on their own without being tied to the repository.
Yes,
they absolutely have to. And you're not going to contain them inside a single notebook. That would be a disaster.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
No, I mean another analog to this is like the cloud configuration notebook, right? The whole configuration of cloud isn't the cloud isn't contained in the notebook. It's just configuration.
Yes. Right? I do think that the manifest. So show me a Packlet manifest. Where is there one? Where how can I
go back to the web browser? Go back to the web browser. And then click on prototypes, like right at the top there.
This one here?
Right. No. Go up.
No, all the way at the top. Scroll.
Where it says Arnoud Buzing slide. Yeah, that one. And then scroll down a little bit. Then click on prototypes folder. The first one in that list of, So there's a packletinfo.m file. That's the key manifesting.
Right. So that manifest is
that has all the versioning that Todd described and the what functions it provides and where the documentation lives and things like that.
What does that mean? What does that mean there?
It's the main page of the Packlet documentation. Yeah. Main guide page.
Main page is the thing that you'll get directed to if you just type the Packlet name unadorned into the documentation center. It's just a way to say, this is what I want the user to see if they just type my Packlet name into the documentation center.
I mean, we don't have good documentation tools, but if we solve that problem too, then...
Well, we're solving that problem. That's a separately being solved problem.
Brian is in the meeting for that as well.
But that's
questions from our live stream that have to do with how do we prevent malware? How do we sign Packlets?
That is something that is going to have to be added, but there's nothing like that in there now.
Because everything is right now going through our release engineering process and coming from our servers.
Right.
Yes. Every now and then we get a question from a user who's worried about, checksums checking during a download, just to make sure no man in the middle, attack has given them some bogus Paclet. And at the moment, we actually don't have anything for that either. I think that's.
And if there's some .Paclet file in the wild, like the one, on the, like this prototypes thing, then you just have to trust, you just have to.
No, if you install it, you have to trust it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can look at the code. So.
Right. So we need some security, some, HTTPS like. I mean, what is the actual protocol by which we're transferring these things?
They're downloaded just on the web, just HTTP.
And if we were using HTTPS, wouldn't we avoid the man in the middle situation?
Yeah.
So
I guess.
In terms of what the Paclet itself actually does, it's our intention to create a system which may not be 100% foolproof, but which I think we can create a fairly decent system for this that will basically automatically scan a package and ensure that that package has or Paclet has no no side effects that that create symbols or run code outside of a given namespace. So in the Paclet repository world, you will be assigned a namespace, which is going to be some combination of your the name of the account that is submitting the Paclet, and then the name of the Paclet itself. And within that namespace, you can define symbols, and those symbols, of course, might have really terrible code in them. Whether it just behaves, whether it's just code that does dumb stuff or code that does dangerous stuff. And we're not necessarily going to be blocking that on any kind of automated basis. I don't think we can, but what we can do on an automated basis is prevent you from doing things like, auto running code, on startup that, sends files, offers
okay, fine.
overwriting plus or something like that.
Okay.
What we've also talked about that I think would be good is having like a verified Paclet system where you can submit something to actually go through thorough testing and get a check mark. It might not be free, but I think that's something that people would respect.
Okay, but the fact is, okay, so I just want to remind people, and also folks on the live stream who are interested in this, the function repository is our lightweight way of doing these things. Carl is mentioning that there are lots of functions, orphan functions lying around on Mathematica Stack Exchange. I'm sure that's true, and it would be wonderful if somebody started to go through and actually put those in the function repository. I mean, so the function repository is for function at a time stuff. The Paclet repository is for big heavyweight packages that have their own, that are going to introduce symbols that are not, I mean, the function repository, which is already preliminarily live, but it contains all kinds of all kinds of things here where any given function is, you can just, let's see, how would I do this? I just go here and I can use that function just as a resource function. And now I could say something like this, and it will just work. And that's the kind of lightweight way of introducing global functionality. And Paclets are a heavyweight way, because what will happen is, presumably, that most people will, okay, people are mostly going to be auto-loading Paclets. Is that true? Or are they going to be doing a needs-like thing for Paclets?
I think auto-loading in general is kind of evil. I think.
Yes, but we're doing that.
So,
to be clear, the Paclets that we use today, which are for system functionality, are essentially all auto-loaded. Right?
Yeah,
the Paclets that are
the vast majority of them are.
Right. I think if the auto-loading is based on in a symbol in the context that John described earlier.
But like for example, we have other Paclets which are distributed internally, Docu Tools, Git Link, that kind of thing, which are not auto-loaded. You have
Yeah,
to
and it's
do
a
something.
mess to install them. I mean, I have some.
Okay. What you just said is wrong.
Okay.
And it's not even answering my point.
Okay, go ahead.
My point isn't about installation. My point is about, how do you get to the functionality, or whether you call get or whether you open a palette or something like that, which is totally different from the installation question.
Fair enough, but I mean, where
installation is Paclet install. That's
okay, fine. But so when I go to my DocuTools installer, what is that?
So this is basically
a
wrapper for, well, in this case, Paclet update, I think it is, but yeah.
Yes.
The command is actually executing is just Paclet update of DocuTools with the right server name.
And obviously, in order to make this a first-class citizen, we want, first of all, language stuff that's going to be in the system context that does this, and second of all, a nice panel, of that allows you to kind of GUI your way through this would be nice too.
Okay, so I mean, to compare the function repository with this will be a thing where you can have a dashboard that says these Packlets are enabled, these ones are not enabled, those kinds of things. Is that correct?
And
whereas in the function repository,
and presumably would allow you to install new ones and remove existing ones.
Right, but so in the case of the function repository, you either call the function or you don't. There's really nothing to discuss about,
right.
The question of whether it's installed or not. It's all irrelevant. I mean,
well, and I think that your question is an interesting one, and not one that we've really deeply discussed at least in any discussion that I've been involved in, which is, and this reflects back to Todd's kind of, gut reaction that auto-loading is evil. But, if we know that everything, is confined to its own context, do we want to compel people to add a get or a needs command? I think that's a fair question.
Encourage, at least.
For what?
Encourage is supposed to compel?
Yeah. Sorry, I meant encourage autoloading instead of compel.
Well, wait. Let me just be clear. Autoloading, I think, is actually really nice for if we tell people that they're going to type, my namespace backtick function name, and if it autoloads based on a fully qualified function name, that's perfectly fine. When I talk about I'm talking about people just typing in the short name and expecting it to auto.
Right. So that's what we're doing. I mean, in the function repository, the way we're doing it is, string names and a global namespace, basically, where people have to register their names. Now, the alternative to this is how do I get the UUID for this? I guess I can just say here resource.
You can use a second argument in resource function, or you can go through the resource object. Either one.
What's the second argument?
UUID, all caps.
Okay, so to be clear, that's what the function really is. And this is just its short name, right? And so the URL, this is ultimately a URL, right? So if I say resource object, if I were to say, I think even just saying resource object of noun queue,
right,
would give me that resource object. Yeah, nice, very nice. And there's where it actually is. Okay. All right. By the way, on our live stream, Brian is talking about the assembly strong name of .NET. I think strong names are, I'm guessing that they're the same kind of thing as you're saying, a fully qualified, this fully qualified name idea. Is that right?
Yeah, strong name is a sort of like a signed thing as well. It's tied up with code signing. So it's more like the security thing John was talking about, where we have, signed Packlets that are known to have,
there was that interesting idea recently of having code named by its hash. And I wonder if that has.
I mean that's it's effectively another form of content addressability.
Yes. But I mean, if it's code named by its hash, then that gives you effectively signing as well.
Yeah, but it doesn't nicely deal with the problem of upgrades.
I agree. All right. Okay. So let's zoom out.
But in any case, I mean, the general point is that my view has been that if we are composing the namespace from the username and the Paclet name, then we make certain classes of problems go away. Such as people spamming things based on a kind of typo.
Okay. So here's an
something
issue.
like that.
Here's an issue. Like my username, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't is not a symbol name. That just doesn't happen to work. I mean, it's got.
We could use publisher accounts.
Well, I said composed from. I mean, if there's a one-to-one way to map whatever legal usernames are to legal, legal namespace names, then that's not a problem.
We have this publisher system that we've made part of the repositories that would be perfect for this.
Fair enough, but it's going to be an obscure UUID, isn't it?
No, the publishers have pretty names that are unique, and we.
Do I have a publisher ID, for example?
In 12.1, that'll resolve to your defaulting, but you have access to one called Wolfram that a dozen other people at the company have access to. It's a many-to-many. You can have access to multiple publisher IDs. Multiple people can have access to one publisher ID.
All right. Okay. Fine. So that's a way. What you're describing there is a way of using our context system. Okay. So the auto-load concept.
Is this a meeting where we start putting our dibs down for one-letter publisher IDs? I put my dib on J.
Right. There's a land grab situation.
This is one of those fortunate things. The registration of names is one of those things where one learns that the world is actually finite. That the number of people who want, otherwise none of those things that involve registering names would ever work.
Right. Only one person will be able to get, Susan K. Right? And the first Susan K will get Susan K. But we since we have a human looking at it, only NASA is going to get NASA. Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's right. Yes, I could tell a big hard luck story. In 1976, when I got my first login on a computer system that was an interactive computer system, I really wanted to get SW, and that was already taken, and was the system on the ARPANET. So I got SWolf. I finally met many years later the woman who had got SW as her username on that system. Anyway, silly story. So for many years, Wolf was my login. Okay.
Ironically, it wasn't even her name, SW. She just picked some random letters.
Yeah. No, I think her name was Sylvia Wood or something like that. I don't remember. Okay. But so what you're proposing then is, so for example, that there be something that says something like, Paclet backtick J backtick foo, and that were you to reference that, it would auto load. There's more than that. There's more than that.
It's not clear to me whether I would, require something like Paclet backtick in front of it, but yeah.
You're going to reflect either that, or we're going to have to break that. I mean,
well, we could, for example, require all such namespaces be lowercase.
Fine. Well, okay. I personally
would never collide with anything that we did. So
no, but it might collide with other user stuff and so on.
And we could also use something like resource Paclet for a name, and then a string of Paclet, or not even, you wouldn't need the Paclet. Then you could just have J tick or colon foo, right?
What are you talking about?
We could have a system symbol like resource Paclet that sort of makes it friendlier.
Why would that make it friendlier? Because then we can have a string name and we can have anything we want. But that doesn't solve the problem of you're writing code and you just want to refer to symbols in that Paclet by their fully qualified names and expect that they'll just be there. See, the thing that I don't like is, you have a piece of code somewhere at the beginning of your code, you say needs whatever. I mean, this relates to the package system that we've been talking about, right? This relates to the new package system with imported symbols, exported symbols, and so on, right?
There is some connection, but we haven't, I think, done a good job of drawing that connection yet.
Okay, so we need to do that because this is going to be related closely to the exported symbols business and so on. Because, what the thing is, once you've declared that you're in a package, then, once a piece of code in a file says it's in a package, then it can auto-qualify itself. The bad case is when you're doing things interactively, you've got a need somewhere far away. It's like the x equals 7, and then you use x a long time later, and whoops, it has value 7.
Well, and something that's kind of related to that is we've talked about having a namespace aliasing measure, but the namespace aliasing measure has exactly the same problem. What is its scope? How far does it reach?
Yeah, well, I think what we've talked about in the package system, which, by the way, we need to get back to as soon as 12.0 ships, is that is primarily dealing with files, and that's really a very lexical thing. It's a pre-processing step that's actually dealing with the lexical names of things sitting right there in the file, but it's not addressing the interactive issue. Okay, but having said all these things, and we're going to run out of time soon, let's take a look at these functions here and how horrifying or not these are.
Stephen, we have already done this. You and I did this in May of this, last year. Went through this whole list. I got notes in that JIRA ticket about, they scribbled down about the changes you wanted made. We've been through all this.
Okay, so was it a fairly cosmetic set of things that had to be done?
The only thing that wasn't just cosmetic, the main thing that wasn't just cosmetic, was your desire that this Paclet expression essentially be, not just a wrapper for metadata of something, but it would be more of a wrapper for be more of a descriptor of the content of the thing rather than just a sort of a name for a Paclet. You had some desire that.
Can we see this document? Can you send me the JIRA ticket?
It's in the chat. First thing. And these are just my scribbled notes that I put into a ticket for me to read later after that meeting.
Okay, so this is it?
Yeah. Packard becomes Packard. I mean, there were some, kind of breaking changes in the stuff you wanted, and I thought I could see ways to make this stuff all work, but I haven't dived in. Packard becoming Packard object.
Yeah, okay. So these seem like those are largely cosmetic kinds of things. How do you scroll this pane? Oh, for God's sake, what did it just do?
There's a scroll.
You click cancel.
What did I click? What?
You clicked it to edit it.
I think it's scrolled to. It's already, the whole thing is shown there. There's nothing to scroll.
That's it. There's nothing left to scroll.
Okay.
I think Todd's pointed that something that you consider cosmetic is actually a lot of work, like Paclet renamed to Paclet object.
Right. I mean, most of the stuff is cosmetic and not hard at all. Some of it was a little bit.
Why is the renaming
and then of course there's one.
So horrifying?
Wait, what was the question?
Why is the renaming of Paclet to Paclet object so horrifying?
Well, it's probably gonna have a lot of tendrils in a lot of places, since we have to have full backward compatibility for Paclet expressions. So
Wait. Why do we have to do that? I don't understand why we have to do that. Why is it not the case that the Paclet server?
Well, for one thing, you wanted the Paclet info file to have Paclet object as the head, right? You want.
No, I understand, but why isn't it the following thing? The Paclet server sees a version 11.3 contacting it. Okay, great. It gives it whatever 11.3 had, which is frozen anyway. it sees a 12.1 or 12.2 contacting it. It says, great, I can use the modern stuff. Here it is. What's the problem with that?
Well, it's just that a Paclet, I might have released a Paclet 5 years ago that still works with every version of Mathematica. And when you install that Paclet, you're going to get an old style Paclet.
So what? So you let the ingester accept both. I think that's what you have to do anyway. The ingester will just say, okay, great. You know, if I see a Paclet object, I ingest it. If I see a Paclet, I'll ingest that too.
Right, but I'm not sure what you mean by the ingester. The ingester is the Packard manager and all of its code, and
I understand. I'm saying that you're obviously going to have to go through that code, and you know the front end ingestion in that code is got to be dealt. You know, has got to handle Packlet object and take those apart because it's going to have an association. It's not going to have a list of rules.
The people on the Twitch chat are freaking out about that name change.
Tell the people on the Twitch chat that I think we can
saying,
handle.
oh God, please don't do that. Please don't change Paclet to Paclet object. That breaks tons of user code.
Why does it break
user
user
code? We'll make it work.
Only if we don't keep supporting Paclet, which I think we can.
Yes, we obviously will continue to support Paclet. But you know, there's people who've written code that says, you know, if head of percent, head of X is Paclet, then blah, and the head of blah is maybe going to be Packard object now, for example. I mean, there's going to be user code that has named these symbols in it. Come on. We're clearly not going to be burnt. We can't say, this has never been a documented user accessible thing. If people have used it, great. But this is not something we've committed to, and it was never carefully designed. And it, it's obviously going to be modernized in various ways. So, we might as well. I don't understand why it's going to break anything. Why would it break anything? Unless somebody has their own Paclet server. Well, the Paclet server is really not involved at all, right? Paclet server is just a dumb website that serves up .Paclet files. It's all about the code in the Packard manager and code people may have personally written to deal with Packlets. And some of that personally written code may use symbols from, like the symbol Packlet, from the Packard manager namespace, and that code might have to change. But I think that to the people on the Twitch right now, I think that we can make Packlet object and Packlet still work for almost everything, and people won't have to get too worried about. I mean, ultimately, it's the principle of, your code might not work with new objects, but we will continue to work with old objects, So if you have old objects still lying around, we can work with them. But obviously, if we don't have permission to make, some new style objects, then we never progress. Right. And we can have, I'll probably introduce a function like Paclet Q or something that people can start using that will will return true for either a new or old style Paclet. So if people have code that's, sort of manually looking at heads, they can replace it with something like that. I think
Paclet object Q. Come on, Todd.
Okay, fine. Right. I guess it would be. But I mean, the rest of this stuff is, it looks like this is not particularly, other than these name changes, which who knows, this does not look particularly dramatic. Right. I agree. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think one big step that needs to be done is just progressing through some of this, what in a sense is grunt work. And I don't mean that to denigrate the people doing it, because I suspect I'm going to be one of the people doing it too. In terms of, first of all, making these sorts of changes, and second of all, actually getting things documented. Yes. Okay, so the other thing is the exposure of shingles from all of this stuff. The thing goes in the resource system, and then the Packlets
I mean, we have no idea how they're going to expose shingles.
And it's I think it's more than the exposure of shingles. That's part of it, but there's a submission system which is, I think, going to look modestly different from what we've done so far.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the submission of wow, somebody on the live stream is claiming that the message call stack has had a memory leak since version 11. Interesting claim. Okay, well, well, now's the time.
We'll take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay, but let's just talk for a second about the shingling stuff, because the good news with the function repository is we actually have a very clear notion of what a single shingle should look like, right? We don't have, I mean, this is a shingle, it's very straightforward, it's authored here, and when we go to the top of the function repository, it's going to change, but fundamentally, it's going to look something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Probably at the level of the Paclet repository, this is how the top level could look. But when you go below the top level, every Paclet is its own universe.
Right. There's no way we can fit everything on one vertically scrolling page. Yeah.
No. But what I mean by that is that what should happen is
there may be very different kinds of things. There might, for example, be Paclets that have no documentation, and that would be perfectly reasonable.
Right. So I mean, what we really want is a readable exposure of the Paclet info file together with whatever documentation may be provided.
Now, let me say, though, that my thinking is that rather than trying to accomplish everything at once, that we start with a simple but really useful subset of Paclets, which is to say Paclets which just contain Wolfram language code.
Sure.
So I think by confining the problem, we can get something that's out the door sooner. It is a subcase, but it's probably the largest subcase, and it's also the most similar to stuff we've already done.
Well, but okay, but let's pull back from that for a second, okay? So the main thing I'm concerned about, I mean, people have been arguing, oh, why are we doing the function repository? We should just do the Paclet thing. That's obviously wrong, because the function repository is a clearly useful thing that is very well defined, that is fairly lightweight to contribute to and lightweight to use. To me, just saying it's pure Wolfram language code doesn't really help with what the shingle looks like, for example. It could, for example, let's say
it does a little bit, because if it's Wolfram language code, then that the functionality that exposing is functions.
No, you don't. It could be a palette. That's perfectly reasonable.
No. That's why I'm defining the subset of Paclets in the initial release.
Yeah.
As being code only. I'm not saying it will be that way forever.
I see. Well, by code only, you mean you don't mean it doesn't have C code. You mean it doesn't have a palette, for example.
Right. It's basically just functions and documentation.
So you mean
what about compiled code, like Wolfram language compiled code?
I think that, well, as far as Wolfram language compiled code, I'm a little unclear on that, because I don't know enough about exact.
I think that's packaged the same way. I think it's irrelevant. I think it looks just like Wolfram code.
But I am saying in the first pass in the first pass that we do exclude library link, and that's because I want to work on getting this this automated vetting system up and running. I don't, as much as possible, I want to avoid human curation. Maybe there's a value added human curation.
I think we're going to need human curation.
But I don't think curation should be a requirement for this, and so I want to get the automated stuff up and running, and to do that, I think we start with the simpler case and we solve that set of problems, and then we grow the set of problems incrementally from there.
Okay, so let's just understand what our roadmap is for what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so first question is, how many Packlets do we have that are not the internal ones that we already have a solution for? How many Packlets do we think we have? Well, that could immediately be put into the system.
So there's a link on the Zoom chat. Hold on, let me actually, from external users, a Packlet repository.
Fine. Yeah, so that's an example. But
and there's, I don't know what the number of Packlets is.
You talking about external ones, Stephen, or internal?
No, I'm talking about. Look, for the function repository, we will have a solid few hundred functions within a fairly short time that have been got from all kinds of different sources. And it would be fantastic if somebody went through Stack Overflow and got a bunch of things from there too.
There's a plan for that once we announce it.
Fine. But anyway, I mean, it's going to have hundreds of functions that, on initial release. So my question for the Packlet repository is, do we similarly believe that there are a decent number of sort of already built, already around?
Click the last two links on the Zoom chat. You can get an idea. There's a fair number. On the Zoom
There's also a lot of pent-up desire to build this.
This looks beautiful. Oh, interesting.
Click the second link.
Wow. Yeah, well, that's
the second link.
Which?
PackageData.net.
Nice.
But that's the people in the chat are actually involved in these things. So.
Wow. Cool. Why do they need us? They can just do this themselves. This is great.
Well, they've done all the work of creating this stuff. Now they just need us to give them the tools to easily document and make these available so that people can type Packlet install, economical or something, and then it'll work.
And so the next person,
I mean, for example, people are frustrated with the story around documentation.
Yes.
Yeah, and we should definitely talk about that before this meeting ends, because that's a big piece of effort that is not going to be done by me, for example.
No. That piece of effort
make this
is being launched. We are, Jay is in Andre's group is going to be working on this. I mean, essentially what we're doing is
there's a meeting on it tomorrow.
Oh, okay, fine. Are we going to live stream?
Not with Stephen.
Oh, okay. When you have one with me, we could live stream it. People might be interested in that. I mean, fundamentally, the objective is to simplify DocuTools, right? We're stripping out. I mean, there's just tons and tons of random junk in here that is for very internal issues, right? And we're, this is a freaking airplane cockpit. This whole thing
needs to be simplified both on that end and in the back end too.
Yeah, I don't know about the back end side of it, but
actually, one might argue we wish it were an airplane cockpit. Then it would be simpler.
Yeah, modern airplane cockpit. Anyway,
but at least be a training course on how to use it.
Right. Anyway, the people have to be recertified every so often. Never mind. They
just need a very basic, easy to use documentation tools. Just to
right,
make
but by the way, when you say very basic, I mean we have, even all this stuff with making notes tables isn't completely trivial. Spanning things and so on and so on and so on.
That part is fine. That I consider that basic. There's nothing wrong with that. But like go under other, for example, like the big O tab with the 5,000.
Yeah, I mean, there's just crazy stuff here. There's all
and the crazier thing is all the stuff that's missing from here, which we keep complaining about.
Yeah, I mean, you can do. I mean, this is like a. I'm telling you, this is like you can do anything from here. You can make a new blog post.
I wish you could do anything from there. There are things I want to do from here that I can't.
Like what?
Like write pages for WSTP.
Oh yeah.
Writing WSTP documentation is a nightmare because there's no support from the tooling for it.
You'd be happy to know, John, that is actually coming. soon. It's pretty high on Jay's list.
Okay,
but
for low values of soon.
yes, I know that's not always a given here, but yes. The other thing that's missing here is that DocuTools is great. It lets you write authoring notebooks, but that does not make built pretty versions of notebooks, and that is an entire set of code that is divorced entirely from DocuTools.
Yeah.
So the Wolfram Workbench comes with DocuTools that are, I think, a simpler version of this.
It does
already. And I had a user asking me, like, well, can I not just, break that off and develop that myself further? And I'm not sure what to, I didn't know what.
Yeah,
we'd be happy to see that happen.
We got some feedback from the tech conference. There are people using those tools in Workbench, but it's, I haven't really used the tools much in Workbench. I've been a bit of an end user of them. And even as an end user, it's like, how many button clicks does it take to actually build the documentation? Something like 9 or 10 every time you want to do it or something like that.
But I just want to emphasize that, for example.
But a lot of people do want to break it out of Workbench, though.
Fine. Look, there's the simple documentation case for function repository, and there's the much more complex one for arbitrary Packlets that involve guide pages and WSTP pages and all kinds of things like this.
Well, and by the way, that's another reason for my thinking that we should begin simpler in scope, because we can also be simpler in scope on the documentation side.
I would even suggest putting the DocuTools, the simpler version, on our GitHub, and make that forkable and let people.
That's fine. Yeah, it's great.
That would be great, because then we can directly see what users want to do, and I
don't see any problem with that. Sounds good to me. Okay, we got to wrap here, but let me just address some other comments on the live stream here. Brian, what is the architecture for getting Packlet updates from the repository? Will it check for newer versions every time Mathematica starts, periodic background process, or on demand?
Okay, the answer to this is that this person's asking about auto updates to Packlets. And in the past, we kind of had some way which a developer of a Packlet would have to jump through some hoops, but now there's an incredibly simple way in a Packlet info file. You just write updating arrow automatic. And if you put that into your Packlet after a user installs it, at the moment your .m code is loaded, but before it actually loads the code, it will auto-update, look for an update and download it and install it. So it's trivial to make a Packlet now that auto-updates itself.
Okay. Will there be a simple way for users to host their own Packlet servers? Will there be a $Packlet site that can set to any server? I think the answer to both those questions should be yes. Now,
and $Packlet site is reserved for our Packlet site, but Packlet site add exists, and that lets you add any Packlet site, any number of Packlet sites to.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the right way to do it. We might need some cosmetic redesign for that. It's
like a Packlet site path.
Yeah, yes, that's what we'll want. It's like $Cloudbase, which will become $Cloud Path when people can get cloud objects from multiple cloud servers, from multiple clouds in a certain path order. Question: if the initial release supports code only, would that still allow library link? Well, John is saying no.
No, not yet. But it's not that I want to leave stuff out because hey, my favorite Packlet uses library link, the one that I developed. But I want to see something shipping sooner rather than later, rather than waiting months more so we can get everything.
Yeah.
And with the way I'd like to approach this, where the kind of Packlet cleanup of the Packlet functions and symbols, that would happen really before the repository got fully underway. We can do a lot of pre-work, obviously, but even if the repository doesn't support those things, you could make Packlets with them. So
yes, absolutely. Just because you couldn't publish it on our server doesn't mean you couldn't make a Packlet.
Right. So someone with an unpronounceable name here is asking about security, and basically the scheme, similar to the function repository scheme, is those things that are published in our function repository we have vetted, and we, have are as certain as we can be that they're not going to break security and privacy and do crazy things with your system. If you get them from an out in the wild Paclet server, well, that's up to you. I mean, it's the same thing as any situation. You've just downloaded code from the internet. Do you want to run it? Type thing.
And I think another important tool for that is to engage the community in that. I mean, this is.
Yes, that would be very nice to have a Paclet server where people can flag things as inappropriate and so on.
Yeah, being able to flag inappropriate. On the other hand, being able to support something like likes or upvotes or something, which is a metric of something that is popular and useful.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in a different context before, and I'm skeptical about that because of the different user communities. Because I think something may be a fantastic chemistry package, but there aren't as many people doing chemistry as doing physics, for example. And,
well, sure. But if you do a search for chemistry, you might still want to know the most up-liked, or maybe the most download, the one with the highest download counts, or something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, fair point. All right. Well, okay, great. We've got the beginning of a path here. I mean, I think what's the next step?
The way I see the main next steps are Todd's work on the functionality and the work on the documentation.
Okay, so does that need more design work, Todd? Or do
no, that needs me just to dive in and say I'm doing this now.
And
all the other things I'm doing.
And it's my intention to work with Todd on the documentation side of things. And also after we get version 12 wrapped, I intend to put together a larger plan for what the first version of the repository would
right
like.
Right. Yeah,
and
John
can we
and I
make sure
need to start meeting to work out all those details.
Right. And so one thing I think we need to do, we have presumably another meeting coming up soon for the package system. And I do want to make sure that we understand how the package system dovetails with these Paclet, with putting things in Paclet.
Yeah, and I have not been in those meetings, but I should probably be in any meeting where we start talking about that.
Fine. I think the package system, the design is fairly well developed, actually. And I think it will be a good time to have one sort of final meeting about that before we start implementation of the package system and to look at that cross connection.
Right. Eventually, you could imagine that the interface to the Paclet repository would create a framework that instructs people or directs them towards well-written code and well-structured code. And that would be the new package system. That would involve the new package system.
Well, for sure.
Initially, we're expecting people to show up with their stuff made.
Right. I mean, it's similar to the pre-flight for the function repository, which was still, which I hope we're progressively adding rules there that tell people that they got to do this, can't do that, etc.
Yeah, that's how we're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like the way that we're dealing with options and so on. And that's yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thanks, everybody. And thanks particularly to the folks on the live stream. A lot of good comments. Much appreciated. And we'll try and build something useful. Okay. See you all soon.